All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, may I warmly welcome you to the Habibi Center's Talking ASEAN webinar. It is quite unfortunate that this discussion had to be conducted virtually due to the current COVID-19 restrictions. But nevertheless, I hope everyone is safe and healthy, and I hope that we will have a productive and fruitful discussion today. May I kindly introduce myself? My name is Taufan Samudra. I will be your moderator for today's Talking ASEAN webinar on preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and will ASEAN take action? As you may recall, in the beginning of 2021, we witnessed the increase of Chinese military activities near Taiwan, such as building naval ports, conducting scores of military exercises, sending warplanes, and conducting 380 sorties into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or we may know it by ADIZ. This event draws a lot of attention from the international community, which was shown through the several bilateral meetings that were held by a number of countries, such as the US with Japan, the US and South Korea, and Japan and Australia, which all emphasized the importance of preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. A joint leader statement between the US and Japan marks the first time in 50 years that the leaders of the two countries had broached the topic of Taiwan. In addition to the bilateral meetings, the G7 summit, which was held on 13 June 2021, produced the first communique that has underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The growing cross-strait military imbalance is increasing concerns in regards to Taiwan security, as well as discussion of the possibility of kinetic warfare. As for the worst scenario of war breaking out in the Taiwan Strait, the halts in economic activities, trade routes between Southeast Asia and East Asia, and the global supply chains of semiconductor industry from Taiwan are also likely to take place. Given Taiwan Strait circumstance as a tipping point and a potential conflict area in the future, however, ASEAN as a regional organization has not given any response or statement on the current situation in the Taiwan Strait yet. Against this backdrop, will security in the Taiwan Strait be a prioritized area to be discussed in ASEAN regional framework, or will ASEAN release any statements regarding the issue? Therefore, given the various aspects that have to be covered to comprehensively discuss this very interesting and thought-provoking topic, we are highly pleased to have two distinguished speakers to join our session in this beautiful morning. First, we have Professor Hikmahanto Juwana. He is currently a rector at the Jenderal Ahmad Yani University and also a professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia. Finally, we have Vice Admiral Amarullah Octavian, who is also a rector at the Republic of Indonesian Defense University. As mentioned, I would like to thank our speakers today to spare their time despite their busy schedules. I was also notified earlier that Vice Admiral Amarullah Octavian will have to leave the discussion early as he had prior engagements. With that said, I hope we can start the discussion as soon as possible, as I believe a lot of us are impatiently waiting for this discussion to commence. But before we begin, I would like to briefly explain the procedure of our discussion today. Our webinar will be divided into two sessions. Firstly, the presentations from our speakers with 15 until 20 minutes allocated time respectively. So the first speaker will be Professor Hikmahanto Juwana for 15 until 20 minutes and followed by Vice Admiral Amarullah Octavian. After all the presentations are concluded, we will move on to the Q&A session. As you may know, this webinar is also publicly live streamed at our YouTube channel, and our viewers can ask questions or give any comments on the YouTube's live chat feature. Now that we have covered all the procedural aspects, I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Hikmahanto Juwana, to share his views on our topic of discussion today. As previously mentioned, Professor Hikmahanto is currently a rector at the General Ahmad Yani University and also a professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia. Among all of his accomplishments, Professor Hikmahanto has been also a member of Dispute Resolution for ASEAN since 2009 and the legal expert team for Republic of Indonesia's Defense Ministry since 2010. I fully believe that his expertise in international law aspect would further enrich our discussion today. So without further ado, may I give the floor to Professor Hikmahanto. Please, Pak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Taufan, and good morning to everyone here, the audiences of the Habibi Center Talking Points. It is a great honor and a pleasure for me to be here and to discuss with you on ASEAN involvement in the tension between actually the US and China, People's Republic of China in the Strait of Taiwan. Let me first begin with the situation between US and China. You know, we understand that the United States, of course, recognize People's Republic of China or the mainland China as a one China. The US does not recognize Republic of China, which is Taiwan, because China has a one China policy. So if you recognize People's Republic of China, then you would recognize that Taiwan is part of People's Republic of China. That is being said as from the perspective, the law perspective, the international law perspective. Indonesia also recognized China as People's Republic of China, not the Republic of China. And this has been our policy towards China, and many other countries have the same policy. And we understand that now China is an emerging power. It has a great potential of economy. Its military is also building up. But the most important thing is China's power to influence the world, if not Asia Pacific. So this becomes, of course, a concern from the United States. And if we look back in the Trump administration has been very bluntly face-to-face, head-to-head with China. And of course, China has to cope with this. And China is hoping that when the administration was replaced by Joe Biden, that the US will change its policy. However, to many, well, probably this is not a surprise. But Joe Biden, when he was inaugurated as a president, he invited representative of Taiwan to come to his inauguration. So from that point, I said to myself that the US will stay its policy of going head-to-head with China. The US does not, even though it has changed the administration, does not say that, okay, we're going to make friends and then, you know, we will work together. And I don't think this is a policy of the United States. I mean, the presidents can be replaced, but the administration, the bureaucracy is there. And the bureaucracy always stated that the US should become a leader, an international place in this world. Secondly, if there's going to be rivalry in any part of the world, then the US will say, we're going to balance that rivalry, that power, whoever it is, whether this is the Soviet Union or now it is China. So the US will try to balance the power. And now we can see that in recent times, especially in May, around May, the US has a fleet. US warship sails through the sensitive waterway that separates Taiwan and the mainland China. Of course, the China is accusing of the US of threatening the peace and stability of Taiwan Strait. However, the US saying, look, we are here not because we want to threaten the peace and stability in China and Taiwan, but we are here because under international law, this is international waters. And we have the right to be here. And we want to have what they refer to as a freedom of navigation. So the US is saying that we are conducting a routine Taiwan Strait transit in accordance with international law of free and open Indo-Pacific. The US military will, they say continue to fly, to sail, and operate anywhere as international law allows. But of course, from the perspective of China, what the United States is conducting, is trying to provoke China, and especially try to send a message to mainland China that Taiwan should be free. Taiwan should become independent. And currently, the current president of Republic of China, which is Taiwan, is very aggressive in saying that we want to declare as if we want to declare our independence. And this is where the United States plays into role. And of course, you probably know that the United States is also see Taiwan as a country that procure its military system from the United States, and Taiwan purchased a lot of military equipment from the United States very dearly. So this is why the United States have an interest. Now, we understand that situation between the two countries. The question is, what can we do from the ASEAN perspective? Are we going to let the US and China place these competitions around the world without ASEAN doing anything? Well, my answer would be no. We cannot let the two rival countries head-to-head, and a third world war can happen at any time if that happens, and we will allow that. So from the ASEAN perspective, we have to do something. But the problem is whether ASEAN countries have the resources, either economic resources, military resources, or even resources that can influence the two countries. I'm afraid to say that we don't have those resources that we needed. Secondly, can we concentrate on international issues while we are still coping with our national issues? And ASEAN countries have their own national issues at the moment, especially facing the pandemic of COVID-19. We are still struggling. So the constituent of ASEAN countries will say it is not right for any government within ASEAN to involve in international issues while they have to cope with the problem in their own respective countries. So this is also an issue that the ASEAN government has to face. Thirdly, the ASEAN government, even though we are claiming that we are one, but actually between ASEAN countries, we have different views and policies toward these two countries. Some would say that within the ASEAN countries, there are those who are the proponent of China, but there are those who are proponents of the United States. If you look, for example, Vietnam, because Vietnam has an issue with China with respect to the 9-line issue, then China would be sided with the United States to give a signal that, look, China, if you do something to us, then we have a backup from the US. But if you look at, for example, a country like Cambodia or Laos, probably these two countries are sided with China. So in that situation, it is difficult for ASEAN to have one voice. And you have to remember, within the ASEAN countries, when they want to have a certain voice, they need to have a consensus. And it's going to be very difficult to have a consensus. But many ASEAN countries, like Indonesia as well, we know that under our constitution, we need to have a role in international issues. So this is where I think ASEAN needs to be there and have a say on the sensitive issues in the Taiwan Strait. How can ASEAN do that? Well, ASEAN can call for the two countries to restrain, actions between them, making sure that they will not involve in any conflict. If there's going to be a quote-unquote Cold War, then we have to be certain that that Cold War never become a hot war. This is a very, very important message to be addressed to the two countries by the ASEAN countries. Secondly, of course, the ASEAN countries may become, one of the ASEAN countries may become a peace broker between the two countries. We're going to have events in this near future which involve the two, US and China being involved in the event. So I was thinking about, at one point, President Yudhoyono made a gesture whereby he asked at that time the US president and the president of China to sit among themselves and hoping that they will discuss something. And this is very important because you need to have a dialogue between the two to make sure that war never happens. Because when war happens, this is not only disrupting, relations between the two countries, China and the US, but also Taiwan, but also the countries in Asia Pacific or even in Asia and any part of the world. And of course, we do not want that to happen in this near future. So having said that, I need to conclude what my discussion is because time is limited. So there are three things that we need to look forward in this near future. One, whether ASEAN countries can have a certain a voice concerning this issue. Of course, it has to be as moderate as possible, so that every ASEAN countries can agree on this voice. That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned before, that ASEAN should initiate a dialogue between the two countries to make sure that war never going to happen, the hot war. Well, if it's a Cold War, we cannot say anything about that, and it is usually happen between two rival countries. Lastly, what we want to see is, of course, ASEAN discussing, what are the implications if the two countries is still in rivalry, especially when we are discussing about coping with the pandemic, because the two countries have vaccines, and with the vaccines they can influence ASEAN countries. So this needs to be discussed. What we do not want is ASEAN to become a victim of the two countries' rivalry. With that, I will stop, and thank you very much for having me here, and I'm very welcome if there's going to be any question on my presentation. Thank you very much, Taufan and Pak Professor Amarullah Octavian. How are you, Pak?
Thank you, Pak. Thank you, Professor. Yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Taufan.
Thank you so much, Professor Hikmahanto, for your very, very in-depth presentation. I took note on several of your statements, particularly on the fact that the U.S. will always try to balance the power of the emerging power, and yeah, we really cannot let the two countries to go head to head, and it is important also to have a certain influence to kind of navigate our ways in this very delicate situation. And yeah, it will be very difficult for us to reach a consensus if there is differences in our views as an ASEAN organization to the two countries. But before we can move on to the session, I would like to gently remind the viewers that questions could be written in our live chat feature on YouTube, and I will be reading it later on our Q&A session. Now, I think it is timely for us to move on to Vice Admiral Amarullah Octavian's presentation. I can see that he's already here joining with us. Thank you, Pak, for sparing your time despite your busy schedules. As previously mentioned, Professor Amarullah is also a rector at the Republic of Indonesia Defense University. Prior to his current profession, Professor Amarullah has previously graduated from the Naval Academy in 1988 and was assigned on board destroyers and frigates until 2002. He commanded KRI Ciptadi, which I believe a Parchim class corvette, in the year 2003, and KRI Karel Satsuwitubun in 2006, both of which I believe are ships operated by the Indonesian Navy. May I also kindly use this opportunity, Pak, to thank you for your service at the Indonesian Navy. I also believe that Professor Amarullah's expertise from his wide ranges of designations will deepen our discussion today. With that said, may I give the floor to you now, Professor Amarullah, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emir, moderator. Good morning, distinguished Mr. Muhammad Hassan Ansari, Director of Program and Research, Acting Executive Director of the Habibie Center, distinguished Professor Hikmahanto, my fellow rector, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning once again to all of you. And thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Emir. First of all, allow me to thank the committee for inviting me to deliver some academic perspective related to the issue of Taiwan Strait and regional maritime security. Yeah, okay. Okay. Sorry, I will go straight. Okay, so this is my curriculum vitae. It's already introduced by moderator, and this is some references I use, several books related to the issue. To begin my remark, I may argue that the issues regarding the Taiwan Strait are always connected to China. China international relations with various countries are always related to China policy to Taiwan. Over the past decade, China has shown rapid development progress in the military and economic field. The China economic strength is currently centralized in some areas of the eastern seaboard that are actually vulnerable to attack from the sea, starting from Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Fujian, Shanghai, and the Gulf of Bohai. Taiwan itself is located in the southeastern part of China body of water, in the middle of the island surrounding the coast island. It is positioned in the key area of Pacific Ocean sea route. Therefore, it can be considered as the key to the southeast coastal area of China and the fence to the 7 provinces in the center of China. Taiwan is not the only China neighboring state whose island sovereignty is disputed against China. China also has territorial dispute with Japan in the East China Sea over the Senkaku or Diaoyu Island, as well as the overlapping claim on the Paracel and Spratly Island chain in the South China Sea with Vietnam, the Philippines, Brunei, and Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, now let us look at what is China's strategic end on Taiwan. According to some experts from Beijing Academy of Military Science in 2013, the danger of war, as already mentioned by Professor Hikmahanto, in the maritime, air, space, and or cyber domain is escalating. The threat of war in the East is more serious than in the West, where the threat of war from the sea exceeds the one that comes from the land. The most serious threat of war might come from a formidable enemy that initiates a war with China through a surprise attack to destroy China's ability to wage war. Meanwhile, the most likely threat of war is limited to military conflict from the maritime domain. Those academic views are similar to President Xi Jinping's statement on the 19th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party in 2017. President Xi Jinping also stressed China's strategic end on Taiwan. He said that China have firm will, full confidence, and sufficient capability to defeat any form of Taiwan independentization plot. China will never allow any person, organization, or political party to split any part of the Chinese territory from China at any time or in any form. Some research from my university show that China's strategic end on Taiwan has already been embedded in the People Liberation Army Navy Power Development Plan since 1980. Admiral Liu Huaqing planned three stages of ALIN Navy power development. First, by 2000, the PLA Navy would be capable of defending China maritime security interests out to the first island chain. Second, by 2020, it is projected to be capable of defending China maritime security interests out to the second island chain. And finally, by 2050, it will be projected to have aircraft carrier and the capacity to operate globally to support China maritime interests. As shown on the screen, the first island chain is a line from the Kuril Island through Japan and the Ryukyu Island, the Philippines, to the Indonesian archipelago. And the second island chain is a line from the Kuril through Japan and the Bonin Island, the Mariana Island, Palau, and the Indonesian archipelago, which extend to the island of Java, then to Singapore and Malacca Strait. Ladies and gentlemen, based on the previous explanation, we could analyze how global interest in the Taiwan Strait issues might affect the international relation of all countries, including countries in the Southeast ASEAN region. In line with World Economic Expert projection that the world economic power will shift to Asia, the center of the world economic power until 2050 will be concentrated on East Asian countries such as Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and mainly China. The projection of the world economic strength could even be further centered in ASEAN until the 22nd century. It is clear how the global interest in the Taiwan Strait issues economic stability for the global warfare. Taiwan Strait and its surrounding water that span from the South China Sea, the East China Sea, to the Pacific Ocean are the route of sea lane of trade. Disruption in this route means disruption to the world economy. Therefore, it is very important for international communities to fight for global interests, including the regional interests in Southeast Asia. Also quite interesting in the view of the Taiwan citizen. Taiwan is a de facto independent democratic nation known as the Republic of China. Most of Taiwan citizens would vote to become independent. But as a matter of fact, mainland China foreclosed that option by threatening war to Taiwan should it attempt to declare its independence. To make the threat credible, Beijing has gradually amassed its military capability. Despite a security guarantee from Washington as implied in the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, Taiwan citizens still prefer to continue being neither a legally independent state nor an official component part of the people of the Republic of China. For the people of Taiwan, this uneasy status quo is preferable to either war or reunification to what used to be called Communist China. It is the best deal Taiwan can get under the current circumstances. From the regional maritime security perspective, we can see various regional architecture that are harnessed as cooperation scheme among states, include the one that are directly and indirectly related to ASEAN. ASEAN internal and external cooperation contribute positively to the world, which makes ASEAN being invited to jointly resolve various issues that may harm the world's security stability. Therefore, ASEAN could play a significant role in the entire architecture of the region for the common interest. Besides China, the United States also has interest on the Taiwan Strait issues, which is not only in the democracy dimension, but also offer economic interests in the region. Geopolitically speaking, Taiwan's geographic position is a natural buffer zone against the mainland China. United States policy is to deploy military power from the East China Sea to the South China Sea, as demonstrated in the routine joint exercise between the U.S. Navy and its allied countries. The U.S. Navy also conduct freedom of navigation operation in the region. This action always ignited a powerful reaction from China. Both countries' military power have even faced front directly in combat alert condition several times. Therefore, the two countries' dynamic over Taiwan Strait could push higher tension. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, since 2015, ASEAN has enacted ASEAN Community along with its three pillars. ASEAN Political Security Community aim to create and maintain political and security stability in the Southeast Asian region. The Taiwan Strait dynamic has also become the domestic discussion within several ASEAN member states, as well as regional discussion among ASEAN member states in the several summits These discussions are aimed at conflict prevention effort through political and security cooperation. Currently, there are several agendas within ASEAN political and security pillar that are related to Taiwan Strait issues. Indonesia perceives that those agendas are important to the success of the other two pillars, namely ASEAN Economic Community and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. The three-pillar success might be beneficial not only to ASEAN member states, but also to other countries around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, many experts, including Professor Hikmahanto, perceive that Taiwan Strait dynamic could result in friction over the political position of ASEAN member states. There are several ASEAN member states with traditional closeness to China, while there are also member states who have territorial dispute against China over the Chinese claim on the South China Sea, as well as other member states who remain in neutral stance. This vulnerability might disrupt ASEAN political security community agendas and disturb Asia-Pacific architecture. All APSC agenda have very tight schedule. Each agenda can run independently and in parallel. All APCS agenda have also a significant relationship with Asia-Pacific architecture. Therefore, the course of the agenda can more or less affect the existing architecture. The worst case scenario is the war between China and the US over Taiwan. Global experience has shown that war in a particular location would have spillover effect to other regions. In this context, the proximity of Taiwan to the South China Sea as Southeast Asia bodies of water contain vulnerability to ASEAN member states should a war occur. In both China and the US, as the conflicting states use nuclear weapons, the destructive impact will surely reach the territories of all ASEAN member states. As shown on the screen, the fallout radius of nuclear weapons that both states possess is larger compared to atomic bombs that were dropped above Hiroshima in 1945. Ladies and gentlemen, tension in the Taiwan Strait should not be overlooked by ASEAN since the escalation of tension could trigger limited or open war in the region. Spillover of war zone and fallout of the weapon of mass destruction would reach Southeast Asian water should war occur. Maneuver of People Liberation Army Navy and the United States warship on the Taiwan Strait should not be seen by ASEAN as a US-China bilateral issue. ASEAN must see it in a broader security context, since the tension might cause further new conflict that could threaten the regional stability. All ASEAN member states that side with China should create a new scheme of international instrument to decrease the tension, while other ASEAN member states could discuss with United States to find peace resolution possibilities. ASEAN effort to maintain regional stability in the Southeast Asian water should be pursued by exercising multi-track defense diplomacy channel with the China and the United States side through regional architecture. To conclude my remark, ASEAN could take a more assertive initiative based on international law in dealing with China and United States on the Taiwan Straits tension. With regard to China and United States assertive measure in Taiwan Strait, there is a new choice for ASEAN to take a more assertive stance in the negotiation to prevent the war. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention. I do hope my academic thought could spark new ideas on how we look at Taiwan Strait from the best perspective. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Professor Amarullah Octavian, for a very comprehensive and thorough presentation from you, which covers various aspects in regards with the current discussion topic. I noted that you mentioned that disruption in this water means disruption of the world trade, which is very interesting, and I completely agree with you. And I also agree that ASEAN should pursue multi-track diplomacy channels with China and the US. So thank you very much once again, Pak Amarullah. Ladies and gentlemen, now we can turn to the Q&A session. We have a few questions already from our participants, and a lot are still coming in. So I will read them out loud to our speakers. The first question is for both of the speakers, so both of Professor Hikmahanto and Professor Octavian. This is from Mr. Kang. The question is, will ASEAN put the wording, the importance of peace of the Taiwan Strait into any of ASEAN meeting, statement, or declaration? Please, probably we can start with Dr. Amarullah Octavian first. Please.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Tang. I think it is also have already discussed by all ASEAN member states. So the discussion of Taiwan Strait issue has already conducted for a long time. So I do believe that there are some possibility to raise up this issue on the table and make it officially declared by the ASEAN after some certain summit. Or maybe ASEAN could create a new scheme how to solve this kind of issue in the separate local summit, or maybe what we call the particular summit that could invite some academician from both sides, United States and also the Chinese, and also discuss about the possibility to decrease the tension. So yes, I do believe that there are some possibilities that we could create the new scheme for this kind of issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Amarullah. Maybe Pak Hikmahanto, would you have any response and comments on this question, please?
Well, yes, I think it is a must for ASEAN countries to state something on the issue. And as mentioned by Professor Amarullah and myself, I think the Strait of Taiwan is an important issue. It is a sea lanes of communications for a lot of international trades, and we want to see stability in the area, also in the area of where ASEAN countries have recently issued with China. So I think this is the least that ASEAN can do, is to put something on that issue. However, as I make aware to many of us that within ASEAN, there are those who are sided with China, those who are sided with the US, and those who are neutral, as Professor Amarullah mentioned. And this is where the drafting of the words is very important, so that the world understand the context of the sentence that is going to be produced of ASEAN countries, that they can understand that what is the message, even though it is not clearly stated. You have to read between the lines this is what we refer to as diplomacy. So I think this is one important issue, and Indonesia could start with producing these words and then offer to the other ASEAN countries.
All right, thank you very much for your responses. And we have another question. This is from Lutfi from the Habibie Center. The question is for all speakers. We have seen how ASEAN and China go back and forth with the South China Sea issue. In your perspective, would ASEAN centrality work well with the Taiwan Strait issue? Probably we can start with Professor Hikmahanto first this time around. Please.
Well, again, as I mentioned, when we say ASEAN centrality, we have to look within ourselves, ASEAN countries. As I mentioned, ASEAN, it is not that this organization have the same views with respect to various facts in international relations. We have a problem when, the PCA issued its award between Philippines and China, that the countries within ASEAN does not agree on the statement that were going to be made between ASEAN countries. There are those who said that the issue with respect to the 9-dash line is not an issue whereby the PCA has the jurisdiction. It has to be discussed based on dialogue between the countries that have conflicts between each other. So they put forward more on the emphasis on the bilateral dialogue rather than giving it to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. But there are those, of course, who said that this is good. The award was good, and we should support the award. And internationally, and from the perspective of international law, this is something that is enlightening. That United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea does not recognize the 9-dash line. So because of this, they failed to make a statement, ASEAN statement. Again, this is going to occur when we are discussing about ASEAN centrality is going to have a role in the tension in the Taiwan Strait. We have to understand that many ASEAN countries does not recognize Republic of China. Most ASEAN countries recognize People's Republic of China as a state. Nonetheless, we understand that PRC, of course, is not an archipelagic state, and I cannot see that the Straits of Taiwan is part of PRC's territorial claim. So we will say that the U.S., of course, will have its basis when they said that we want to have a free and open sea lanes and also the international navigation. So this is where the difficult statement that needs to be formulated by the ASEAN countries to make sure, the message is to make sure that war is not going to happen in the Strait of Taiwan. This is something that is an important message. And how are we going to do that? Then it is something that ASEAN countries need to discuss on formulating this statement.
All right, thank you very much, Pak Hikmahanto. Please, Pak Amarullah Octavian.
Thank you very much. Okay, so regarding the issue on the South China Sea and related to the progress of the code of conduct between ASEAN and China, This is also very important that we could evaluate and analyze what is the significant or influence factor that could harm this kind of process. So in our research in the Defense University, we could observe that some factors that might be the significant factor that we must see or look at for the new scheme or new mechanism to conduct the diplomacy with China. So under ASEAN Political Security Community, there are several schemes and mechanisms that we could identify and to create the combination of this kind of defense diplomacy. As I mentioned before, that defense diplomacy is also very important to apply in this issue, how to accelerate the agreement on the code of conduct. First, in defense diplomacy, we must recognize how important the role of the Navy and also the military to discuss. For example, right now, we conduct also the defense diplomacy on some issues, which is the implementation is could be Navy to Navy talk or military to military talk, or even we could invite another stakeholders such as Coast Guard to Coast Guard talk, and after that maybe we could invite another component that we could discuss on the issue. So the diplomacy itself must conduct in multi-track. It means that we must invite all of the stakeholders and going together in line. What is the goal? Until right now, there are some differences, political stance between the diplomat and the military. So, what is the real goal that we must provide to the Chinese government is very important. So, it is also could play an important instrument how the diplomat discuss routinely with the military in this context. So maybe there are some differences goal between the diplomat and the military. So we must see what is the goal of the its military member state of ASEAN with their diplomat. So after that, maybe we could propose to the China's government what is the best measure that we could apply in the code of conduct in the field. So, in my opinion, there are several clauses. There are several regulations in the draft of code of conduct that might be not too what we call not too vital by the military perspective. So there are some agendas that we have already discussed with the PLA Navy, for example, how to maintain the stability at sea. For example, if there are some incident between the Coast Guard or the Coast Guard with the fishing ship, or etc. So there are some channel that the Navy could conduct communication directly from naval headquarters in Cilangkap and goes directly to Beijing. So this is also the proposal how the new initiative could implement in the next. Thank you.
Taufan, if I may add something to the point that I've made.
Yes, please.
First of all, we need to be aware and bear in mind that the issue have been reoccurring time and over. It never ends. And do not expect that this is going to end, for example, in this near future. It's going to happen again and again. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be high tension, low tension between the US and China in the Strait of Taiwan. We need to bear that in mind. I probably will say that till the end of this world, probably they will, still have that. The basic question that we need to understand is how the tension will not, as I mentioned before, turn into a hot war. And this is where Professor Amarullah was saying that not only the diplomats is trying to negotiate on this issue, but also the military defense. The military defense diplomacy is very important. This is where the military discuss this kind of issue, and then making sure that war is not going to happen. Because if war, hot war, I mean, is going to happen, this is not going to be in favor of either the US or China. But again, this is something that we have to adjust with. We need to get used to this kind of issue. It is the same as in the Cold War between the US and Soviet Union. People were trying to say that they're hoping that this will end, but it never ends until the Soviet Union was dissolved and now become, Russia, and then Russia does not have any military power as it used to when it was part of the Soviet Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Hikmahanto. I noted your statement on that there will be no end of this, maybe until the end of the world. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And I was told that Professor Amarullah Octavian couldn't be able to join us for the rest of the discussion as he had prior engagements. So I believe if he had to leave, I think it's okay, even though I believe a lot of questions are still coming in to Professor Amarullah, but I hope that these questions can be asked to the Professor Hikmahanto too. Please, Pak Amarullah Octavian.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much for all of the director and staff of the Habibie Center. And also thank you very much for the audience. Professor Hikmahanto, my respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak.
Yes.
Thank you, Pak.
Okay.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you.
Okay, Professor Hikmahanto, we have a lot of other questions, if I may.
Sure.
The third one is from Kang. Has ASEAN or Indonesia already mentioned the importance of peace of the Taiwan Strait to China's government, whether in public or privately?
Well, I'm not aware of whether the government of Indonesia have communicated this issue with the government of China, even between ASEAN and China. But I think even though we have not made any statement, I think that countries within ASEAN, including Indonesia, knows the importance of peace and stability in the Strait of Taiwan. Again, as I mentioned, any tension between the US and China will have implication to ASEAN countries. We don't mind if it's a positive implication. For example, when US and China have tension, and then a lot of US firms is going out from China, and of course they will look into ASEAN countries to invest. This is something that the ASEAN countries of course welcome that. But if the implication is a negative implication, then we have a problem. We do not want, of course, the two countries involved in something that we do not want to see. Yeah, that's the important thing. But of course, like now, the Chinese are offering us vaccines, and the US through their quads are also offering Indonesia vaccines. Those kind of rivalry that we have a positive impact, we are welcome to that. And of course, we need to understand also from the Indonesian perspective, because we maintain our international policy of free and active policy, meaning that we will not side it with either of the country. So that is something important for Indonesia and then the Indonesian people to say that we do not want to be sided with either China or the US. What we are sided is, of course, stability, peace and stability in any part of the world, including in Strait of Taiwan.
Okay, but this is very interesting, your answer. You said Indonesia will not side with anyone. We only side to stability and peace. This is very coincidental, because the next question is about that. This is from Arya Gunawan. The question is, there are two questions. The first one, taking into consideration the growing influence of China, as mentioned by your presentation earlier, including in Asia, if there were an open war between China and Taiwan, how many out of 10 Asian countries that will take side with China, and how many will take a neutral position? And more specifically about Indonesia, which side it will take and why? That's the first question. The second one is, how effective and significant the impact of such a gesture demonstrated by President Jokowi with his visit to Natuna Island a few years ago to, quote unquote, scare away China in order to not try provoking Indonesia? That's the second question. Please.
This is, of course, very difficult question to be asked and to be answered. Because you're asking me, Arya, a question whereby I have to predict, and the prediction is if war happens, which of course we do not want war to happen, soon or later. But again, it is difficult to say, because if a war happens, the government, any government within ASEAN countries, when they decide, they need to hear what their constituent is telling. One. Secondly, what are their interests? Do they want to be involved in this war or not? That's another issue. And of course, thirdly, how the domestic politics plays a role on this issue. As probably for Indonesia, it's going to be very difficult, because in Indonesia, when we discuss about our internal politics, when asked, where are you going to side with? Is it the US or China? Most people in Indonesia will say, we cannot live with the US, because they are, quote unquote, say, even though this is wrong, the perception is they are against Islam, right? And but are you going to side with the Chinese? They will say, no, we're not going to side with the Chinese, because they are communists, and we are still in trauma with whatever having to do with China, with Indonesia. So it's going to be very difficult for the government to decide, what they should do if, say, a war between China and US happens, and then who will we be sided with? But again, as I mentioned, because Indonesia maintains a policy where we are free and active, we are not going to be an ally of each other, any countries. So we will say that no, we're not going to be involved in or sided with any country if war occurs. So that is my answer. Secondly, how effective, when President Jokowi went to Natuna Island, it seems to be very effective. It is a message to China at that time that Indonesia, of course, we want to be friends with other countries, but if our sovereignty or sovereign right is jeopardized by those countries, then Indonesia will say that we will not, play around. We will fight you, even though we may not have the resources, but we will fight you. So that is the message to any countries in the world when Indonesia having relations with other countries, that yes, we want to have 1,000 friends, but if our sovereignty or sovereign right is being jeopardized, then we will do whatever we have to do. Yeah, but of course, other countries will do the same. This is where, of course, we have to make sure that our standpoint will not become or trigger for a war to occur. This is something, of course, we have to maintain. But again, I think this is very effective. So that means that we will be friends with China. We are still going to get loans from China. But if China is trying to claim our waters in North Natuna, then we will say, no, you are doing an illegal fishing there. We will do anything that we can do, even including if the US wants to assist Indonesia. And then, as Ibu Retno, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, stated that, yes, sure, you can help us in trying to make sure that our fishery industry, especially in the North Natuna, is going to develop, because this is how we fight with the Chinese in our EEZ. Again, you have to understand that EEZ is not part of our sovereignty. It is our part of our sovereign right, right? Whereby within the sovereign right, you can take as much as resources there, considering also, of course, the environment. And it has been China who's doing that, and we are only catching those fishermen who are taking fish there, and our fishermen does not have the ability to fish a lot of resources there. So this is something that we said to the US government: if you're going to help us, then do this, because this is important. And this is where, if US use Indonesia as a proxy to go against China, if they wanted to.
Yes, interesting. But thank you very much for your answer. We also have another question. I hope you don't mind, but we have a lot of questions coming in right now.
Sure.
How does this is from Shaban, the Habibi Center. How does the individual ASEAN member states' response will affect ASEAN and China relations? As you also mentioned earlier, China and Laos sided with China, and Vietnam may or may not be sided with China. What will be the responses of ASEAN member states currently?
Okay, so in today's world, it's going to be very difficult. The interaction between one state with other states. It's difficult whether, say, a certain ASEAN countries wants to be sided with China because it's once it is to their benefit that they need to side it with China, or whether China is using certain countries as their proxy in an international organization. It's very difficult, and many countries do the same. I still remember when Indonesia were threatened because some of our generals will be put on justice before the International Criminal Tribunal, ICT. And then the Security Council was going to issue resolution to form what they refer to as ICTET, International Criminal Tribunal for East Timor. We go to China and then ask China, because they have the veto power, to at least abstain from that resolution. If they do that, then that resolution will never going to be issued. So this is where the diplomacy plays into a role. So with respect to countries within the ASEAN, the responses is they may say that if I'm have a good relation with China, meaning that I'm going to be close to China, hoping that China will help us. But of course, the Chinese government will say that, okay, because we have now economic resources, we can put money to certain ASEAN countries, and then we're going to quote unquote dictate, the policies of these ASEAN countries, including within the ASEAN, so that ASEAN will not have one voice. At least they will say that if one country say no, as if like a veto, because it is based on consensus, then there's not going to be resolution. So again, the responses will, of course, depends on the interests of ASEAN countries, each ASEAN countries, and also the response of China. I always mention that China needs the world, but also the world needs China. It's a vice versa. The same applies to the US. Maybe on a certain point we dislike US policies, but on other issues we want US to be sided with us. The same thing. The US also, for some issues, they will say that Indonesia, for example, have bad record of human rights. But for other issues, when we are confronted with China, the US may wants Indonesia to be sided with them, and then they will make any offer. That's why when our Minister of Defense were invited to the US, people were very surprised. Why is it that the US, which has been very critical on the record of Indonesian human rights, now invite Pak Prabowo, who the US always mentioned that he's one of the person suspected of conducted the international crimes, are invited to the US. But of course, interest plays an important role. The interest of the US, the interest of Indonesia. So that's my response to the question.
Okay, but thank you very much. I have the last questions are from me, Pak Hikmahanto.
Sure.
So as you also mentioned that the issue of Taiwan Strait is very in a way intertwined with the international law aspect. But at the same time, we also acknowledge China's stance on the whole international law concept. And that's also the reason why they also have the 9-dash line in South China Sea, and all those historical claims on the territorial sea. So, therefore, if, for example, we say that according to international law, China has, for example, violated this clause, this clause, this clause. But again, China doesn't have the similar view or the mutual view like the rest of the globe. For example, what is the perfect resolution for China? So then China will adhere, because it is known that China wouldn't see the international law the same as we see international law. That's the first question. And the second question, this one not pertaining to Taiwan Strait, but also pertaining to maritime security. This is related to South China Sea. So again, as I mentioned, China has this historical claim to the South China Sea territorial, and the ASEAN and China have been maintaining their dialogue through the joint working group, to the senior official meeting on declaration of code of conduct. But at the same time, we see the kind of divided views, right, against the issue. And as we mentioned earlier, Cambodia and Laos sided with China and all that. And I noted that we've already discussed this, but when is the perfect timing for ASEAN to finish all the reading of the code of conduct and adopt it, if the mutual voice of ASEAN is still in a way unreachable? Maybe that's both of my questions. But
all right, first of all, three things in answering your first questions. The international law, how it plays a role on this kind of issue. You know, I always teach to my students as a professor of law and also international law, that a lawyer, if you want to be a great lawyer, you have to be able to see a certain fact from at least two perspectives. Okay, so you cannot see a fact from one perspective only, because a fact can be seen from different views. That's one. The same if this applies to the issues between, you know, US and China, they will say one fact as two different issues. For China, they will see that what the Strait of Taiwan is part of their territorial claim, because Taiwan is part of China, and Taiwan, the Strait of Taiwan is between Taiwan and mainland China. So they'll say that this is part of us. So whoever is going to trespass our sovereignty, they have to face with us, right? But for the US, they'll say, no, the Strait of Taiwan is an international strait. We want to have a freedom of navigation, and we want to make sure that freedom of navigation, right? So again, one fact can be seen from two different perspectives. But this is number two. In the national setting, the one who's going to decide of these two arguments or of these two perspectives, yeah, is going to be a judge, yeah, who preside to a case. Now, the problem with international community is that there's not going to be in any international tribunal. There's not going to be an international judge who's going to decide a case. If there's going to be one, such as the PCA, Permanent Court of Arbitration, the two countries have to agree that they will bound by whatever the decision by the international tribunal. But mind you this, what if one party does not want to be bound by that international decision? Yeah, they can say, you know, it's only a paper. I can trash it to a garbage bin. That's the end of it, right? Meaning that there's not going to be enforcement. Yeah, there's not going to be any enforcement. In that sense, even though we discuss about international law will not become the solution for any conflict. And I always say this to my student, even though I'm also I'm you know, an international law professor. International law for international community usually being used as a justification, as a basis that they have the right? But once international law is not on their sides, then they'll say, I'll just disregard international law. So this is a very different setting with a national law. Yeah. Unless a country which is powerless or less power, yeah, they have to face with a big country, international law prevails. But if two big countries, they're contending with each other, and then they wanted to use international law, you know, just forget it. You know, the international law in the international society still like you know, a law in the jungle. You know, whoever is strong will prevail. Right is mine, right? So the right is based on who is you know, the strongest between the contender. So that needs to be understood as well. Yeah, number two. And number three, when we are discussing about international law, you know, again, as I mentioned, you can always find a basis under international law to support your opinion, to support your basis or your position. Yeah, you need to understand that. So either China or the US will try to say that this is based on international law. Even the Chinese government now are asking their Chinese scholars to have, you know, basis for any claims that China is having. And with their, you know, money, they can invite international scholars to come and then discuss that the finding of the Chinese scholar, and to agree on the finding. Yeah. So again, when we are discussing about law in the international plane, then everything is become relative, and the problem is there's no one who's going to decide except for history. You know, the history will tell us who's going to win or lose. You know, when two contending parties or more parties are face to face. So having said that, you know, the Taiwan Strait, when the two countries, the US and China, are claiming, of course, they will use their basis on international law. But the solution, they will not use international law. Yeah, the solution will be, of course, you know, the powers that they have, you know, the interests that they have, and how the international community responds to this issue. This is where international relations is very important. Whereas on your second issue, the question is about the perfect timing for ASEAN to voice their concern. You know, as I mentioned, again and again, the tension between the US and China, whether it is going to be in the 9-line or in the Strait of Taiwan or on economic issues, you know, trade, will reoccur. It's not going to end today, it's not going to end tomorrow, and it may not end anywhere at any time, you know. So when is the perfect timing for ASEAN countries to say something about this issue? Well, the perfect timing is when the tension is very high. When the tension is so high that, you know, everyone were thinking that the war is going to happen in this near future, then that is the time for ASEAN countries to voice their concern. I think within that timing, the ASEAN countries can agree on something, yeah, because if you are not faced with a common enemy, then you will not have a common interest. But if you have a common enemy, and when I said common enemy here is, you know, the threat of war, then hopefully ASEAN countries will have a say on this issue. And that is the perfect timing. So that's my answer, Tafan.
Okay, Pak Hikmahanto, thank you very much for your comprehensive answer to my questions. I think we have come to the end of our today's discussion. I would like to thank our two speakers, although Pak Vice Admiral has already left, but again, I would like to thank Professor Hikmahanto Juwana and also Vice Admiral Amarullah Octavian for all of your insights on this issue and for all your comments and responses. Yeah, it has been an honor for me and the Habibie Center to have you as our speakers today. I would also like to thank our participants and viewers for taking part into today's discussion and have been very active, asking a bunch of very great questions for our discussion today. With that said, I hope all of you have enjoyed our webinar and stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you in the Habibie Center's other future events. Thank you very much, Pak Hik.
Terima kasih, Taufan. Thank you very much all, and stay safe, stay healthy.
Ya, Pak. Terima kasih.
Bye. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.